let's move forward. Allison would never tell you this because she's very modest, but she just finished and released a book that is about engaging the brain. I believe it specifically refers to UDL in there, but it's amazing and I'm very excited about it. So if you are interested in learning more about neuroscience and how that relates to learning and teaching, then you might want to check out Allison's new book, Engage the Brain, How to Design for Learning That Taps into the Power of Emotion. So next we're going to hear from Jennifer Levine. Jennifer Levine is also at CAST, and she's the Director of Professional Learning. And she's going to tell us a little bit about sort of how one would go about designing instruction with UDL, and also just sort of the way that we talk about UDL. So Jen, whenever you're ready.
Beautiful. Can you all see and hear me?
Oh, I have her pinned, don't I?
Can everyone see and hear me now?
We can hear you, but we will see you in just a moment.
That's all right. I'm not that great looking. So I'm really excited and honored to be here. And I hope I can answer the question now. All right. So I'm bought into UDL, but what do I actually need to do? How do I actually implement UDL? So if you could move to the next slide, Jennifer.
Maybe.
So at CAST, we have kind of a three-part process, a three-step process for implementing UDL. First, you want to set a very clear, rigorous goal. And believe it or not, this is a step that many teachers and professors skip. They sort of come up with an activity first. They have a great idea for something that they'd like to do with their students. And because it's around a book or, you know, a math problem or something, they assume that the goal is clear, but they haven't really set a goal. So first step is to set a clear, rigorous goal. As Allison said, the next step is to anticipate barriers to achieving the goal. And you really want to imagine, much like that dinner party analogy, what are all of the possible things that could get in the way of my students learning what I am trying to teach? And you want to think about things like learning disabilities, but you also want to think about, you know, who may be too shy to stand up in front of the group, who may process things a little bit more slowly, who may process things verbally but not be able to sit and write quietly. Anything that can get in the way of your students achieving their goal. And then you want to use the UDL guidelines to actually plan options that will reduce those barriers. So I'm going to give you a little sample lesson right now. I'm going to assume I'm a Spanish teacher. I can't wait for my kids to learn the alphabet. I know that a lot of my students often get fidgety and don't want to sit still. So instead of me standing at the front of the classroom, I have a really great tool to teach them the alphabet in Spanish. So if you can move to the next slide. So my goal right now for you all is for you to actually try to learn the alphabet in Spanish. So I'm going to have Jen play, in just 1 second, play this video for you. I'd like you sitting at your desk, sitting on your couch in your living room, sitting in your classroom, wherever you are. I'd like you to actually participate. So this is a call and response video, and they're going to sing the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They'll sing out loud. You repeat it back. We're going to go through it once kind of slowly, and then the video itself speeds up, and you're going to try it again a little bit faster. And then, Jen, I think it goes on like 3 times there. So after the second time, we can stop it. But please really try this. Practice it, belt it out, see how much you can absorb in just a little 30-second lesson.
D, E, F, A, B, C, D, D, E, F, Hey, A, C, I, Ho, Taka. Hey, A, C, I, Ho, Taka. L, L, E, E, M, N, N, O, P, Q, R, R, S, T. Q, R, R, S, T. V, W, X. V, W, X. Y, Z, Z. Yo sé el alfabeto. ¡Olé!
We're killing it here, by the way.
A, B, C, D, E, F. A, B, C, D, E, F. Hey, A, C, I, Ho, Taka. Hey, A, C, I, Ho, Taka. L, L, E, M, N, N, O, P, Q, R, R, S, T. Q, R, R, S, T. V, W, X. V, W, X. Y, Z, Z. Yo sé el alfabeto. ¡Olé!
Oh my.
So many of you will be pleased to know I didn't make you go through the third time. Can you move to the next slide?
Yes.
So I'm actually going to ask for you guys to participate. Some of you have already been doing it through the chat. Just in case you don't know how to participate through the chat, at the bottom of the screen there is a bar that they're all a little bit different, but mine, it shows you like question and answer, chat, a couple of other things. If you click on the chat button, it'll open up a screen on the, I think on the side, where you can type in stuff. So I am just going to guess that some of you maybe learned something. I'm going to guess that some of you hate singing, and definitely we're not going to do it sitting in your office in front of the computer by yourself. Actually, how many of you, just by putting something in, can you yes if you actually sing out loud? I want to see a yes for anyone who, Scott sing out loud. Rose, I am blown away. Never thought all of these folks would have sung out loud. I can tell you, I am sitting in the middle of a hotel in Florida. I did not sing out loud. How many of you, just by, again, show of yeses, how many thought this was fun? Would have wanted to do this in a class, in a Spanish class? Give me a show of yeses. How many give me a show of no's? If you, no way in the world would this be how you wanted to learn. Yeah, exactly. I go to PDs where they make me do things like this. That is my least favorite thing on the planet, is having someone make me do something stupid in a PD. How many of you had trouble, again, by yeses, following the letters in Spanish? They showed them when the woman was singing. They didn't show them when you were singing. Yeah. I know one of you is Chilean and a native Spanish speaker. How many of you already knew the alphabet, so this wasn't helpful at all? Give me a yes if you already knew the alphabet. Pamela. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tadwell already knew the alphabet. I think that was Rebecca also, and already knew it. How many of you maybe would have, well, you don't need to answer anymore in the chat, but some of you might have needed more time or more repetitions to get this done. Some of you may have thought it was super fun to just break out of the mold. So what we know, and some of you may have maybe native Spanish speakers, some of you may not. I don't know. There's all kinds of things that we could predict. Variability is predictable. Next slide. And that means that we can plan for it. If you know that all of these things might get in the way, the reason I, as the teacher, supposedly in the little scenario I was giving you, it did have letters we don't use in our alphabet. For those of you who speak Spanish, the che is also that we don't use that. Oh, well, that was Pamela who said that. Yeah, we don't use the che anymore. That was an old version of Spanish from a long time ago. But But I lost my train of thought there. Oh, so when I was originally giving you the scenario, the idea there was, I know my kids aren't going to want to sit still. They're tired of me lecturing at them. So I have this great idea. And I came up with one idea for how I was going to design this lesson to minimize that barrier. And while that's a great idea, I still was having all kids do the exact same thing at the same time. And it may have worked for some of the students, but it may not have worked for other students. Can you move forward in the slides?
Mm-hmm.
So right now, again, into the chat, I want you to think, if you could redesign this lesson, if you have your UDL guidelines in front of you, that would be the best possible use of them right now. Pull them out. If not, you can pull them up on online. I think it's UDL Guidelines, all one word, .cast.org, where you can see an interactive version of the guidelines. But the goal for this lesson was to learn the alphabet in Spanish. So we listed some of the barriers, right? Some of you don't like singing. Some of you it went too fast. Some of you couldn't see, the letters weren't up on the screen. Some of you loved it. Some of you actually sat and blown away at your computers and sang aloud by yourselves. So everything wasn't a barrier. We don't want to scrap the whole lesson, but think of some of the barriers that still existed. And then I want you to look at your UDL guidelines, and I want you to think about how might you use those guidelines to minimize some of the barriers to achieving the goal? Again, the goal was to learn the alphabet in Spanish. So take a minute to think. Ooh, beautiful.
I would also like to say that as a former music teacher, that is not a key that children can sing in.
There are no keys that I can sing in.
They're way too low.
Yeah. As you start glancing through the engagement, representation, action, and expression networks, I'd like you to just start jotting into the chat box. What are some things that you might have designed differently to help? And it can be any age group. So if you all are university professors, think about your own students in a Spanish 101 class. What might you do differently to help minimize some of the barriers to achieving that goal?
We can just talk amongst ourselves right here. If you all want.
Duet. Nice.
You might have any ideas? Slow down. Yeah.
Slow down.
Mm-hmm.
What other thoughts do you guys have there?
Yeah, a question we just had was, why would you need to learn it that quickly?
That's true. I think of change each letter of the alphabet as well as clap or snap. Very nice idea for those who really like to get into it. I think the factor of time and how to slow it down independently would be a benefit. The color of each letter, absolutely. That might not have been perceptible to people with vision issues.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts there? Not use the video, sing together, have the letters written on the board. Mm-hmm. So one thing I'd like you to think about, and then I'm going to ask you to keep thinking, but keep putting stuff in the chat as I talk. We're all thinking about ways that we could minimize the barriers while still having the whole class do the same thing at the same time. And one thing that UDL invites us to do, like that lasagna example that Jennifer gave us at the beginning, right now what you all are trying to do is design the one perfect lasagna that everybody can eat, right? That whether you're vegetarian, lactose intolerant, you hate spicy food, you have, whatever your issue is that you can't eat the lasagna, we're trying to make the perfect lasagna. What the buffet analogy tells us is we don't all have to eat the exact same thing at the same time. If the goal is a healthy meal, then I can put out healthy options all over. I can make sure that everyone gets a protein. I can make sure that everyone gets vegetables. I can make sure that everyone, fiber or whatever. And then I can let my guests pick from which of those options they want in order to achieve the goal, which is to eat a healthy meal. As we look at this alphabet lesson, we don't have to make one lasagna that fits everyone. What about for engagement for those of us who love singing? I could have a little group go over to this corner and they can work together on singing amongst themselves. They can do it call and response with the video, or they could do it as suggested here without the video. They can do it more times or fewer times. But for someone like me, who is a terrible singer, I might be able to go and meet with the teacher who's actually going to be saying the letters aloud while showing them on the board. And so we can have a group meeting over with the teacher. For students who maybe don't like quite so much stimulation, they want something a little bit quieter, maybe there's a group in the back that goes and listens to, you've got a pre-recorded alphabet where they can just silently listen and repeat back on their own. I haven't thought about making this the perfect lesson, but have different choices around the room for how students can interact with that one goal, which had nothing to do with singing. It had nothing to do with performing. The goal was just to learn the alphabet. So again, glance through. I want you to think about what some of the barriers could have been and give me some more ideas like the ones, or hopefully even better than the ones that I just gave you, with how you could redesign this lesson so that all students can access. Do you have students with hearing issues? Break down where each student says or sings the letter. Yeah, to piece that into smaller chunks, I think is what I'm hearing on that one. Jen, how about you? If you had some thoughts on what you might do differently, if this was it doesn't matter whether it's a kindergarten class or a college class, how might you, what options might just pop into your head that you might use to design?
Well, I was thinking about if you were going to use, you could still use the song, but give the students a different way to respond to it. So if they want to sing along, they could. If they wanted to stand up and make up dance moves to go with it, they could. Or if they wanted to have like a sheet at their table that had every one of the letters that they could just point to simply as they went through them. I think being able to give them lots of different ways to respond, even if you still wanted to use that song, I think that could
absolutely
maybe be an option.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's wonderful. So if you can move to the next slide there. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that just gives each of you sorry, we did that one. Next. Hopefully that gives each of you just an idea of really quickly what it means, how we would design a UDL lesson. So I'm not sure this one was necessarily rigorous, but the clear goal here was that students will learn the alphabet. I can anticipate the barriers in terms of who likes to sing, who doesn't like to sing, who likes to sit still, who doesn't. And then I can design options. As you talked about, Jennifer, either it could be one big lesson where there are options for how students will participate and learn within the lesson, or you can have, like the buffet, options around the room for, if you want to learn it quietly, if you want to learn it through song, if you want to move and act out, the letters, you can do that over here. If you want, someone to work with you one-on-one, you can come over here. But you use the UDL guidelines to design options for how to reduce barriers. So just one other quick note that I wanted to talk about is the language of UDL. And just a precaution, before we even jump into designing for UDL, there's a mindset behind it. I think Allison said, "Until learning has no limits," as she logged off on her webinar portion. And we at CAST deeply believe that all students are capable of learning, and that when students aren't learning, it is because of the design of the curriculum, not because of innate flaws in who they are. And sometimes we will say, well, I had this great lesson, but little Johnny was just bouncing off the walls at the back of the room, and there's no way he's ever going to learn until he can just sit still. That's putting the ownership of the problem on little Johnny at the back of the room. The language that we use in UDL would say, I had a great lesson, but it required little Johnny to sit still, so next time I need to design so that my lesson doesn't require every student to sit still. I have my lesson was fabulous, but none of my students did the reading on their own. And that puts it on them. The idea is my lesson was great, but it did not motivate students enough. It did not make connections to real life enough. It did not inspire them enough to go and do the reading on their own. So we're not saying that the reading doesn't need to be done, but that if there is a reason that the reading isn't getting done, somehow that has to do not with me as a teacher, as a human being, it has to do with how I designed the lesson. And so in that middle column there where you see the barriers, that's one of the barriers you have to anticipate. If my students aren't going to go and do the reading on their own, if my students, complain that they're too tired, if whatever they don't get enough help from parents at home, if they can't sit still, what are the ways that I am designing to support in spite of those barriers? Because the barriers are how I'm designing, not innate in the student.